Hello, everyone. Welcome to Eggshell Transformations, a podcast for intense people. My name is Imi, and I'm here with you on a journey.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing very well. Today, I have the honor of speaking to Dr. Nicole Tetreault. She is a psychologist and researcher specializing in the field of neurodiversity. She has conducted extensive research on topics of giftedness, neurodiversity, and the brain differences associated with these conditions. She's also the author of a book called Insights into a Bright Mind, where she explores the intersection of neurodivergent traits, giftedness, and sensory sensitivities. During this interview, we talked about many different things. Nicole shared that she was late in identifying herself as dyslexic, and I also shared a bit of my own personal experiences with sensitivities and health conditions. And we touched on various things, including emotional giftedness, AI, etc. I really hope you would enjoy this conversation and get something from it. Now to Nicole. Hi, Dr. Nicole. How would you like to be addressed? Nicole?
However you like.
Yeah? Okay. All right. I'll just call you Nicole if that's okay.
That sounds great.
Thank you for being here. You have one of the most thorough books on giftedness that I've ever seen. And I love that you touch on, there are not a lot of books out there for gifted adults anyway, but they don't usually touch on things in such a thorough and whole body way. And we'll get into it later, but it actually covers things that I'm personally a geek on, things like microbiota, holistic health. We can get into all of that later, but thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me and the work that you do.
I have your hard copy in the other room. I may grab it later. But in any case, let's begin. How would you define neurodiversity? I know people have all sorts of debates about the terms and what it should and shouldn't include. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, neurodiversity is a wide umbrella of basically individuals that have unique brain wiring and unique behaviors and also unique ways of processing and experiencing in the world. And so when I think about neurodiversity, it really encompasses usually about 1 in 5 people, which is people with that are on the autism spectrum. Attention, hyperactivity, giftedness is the way that Matthew C. Fugit likes to talk about it. I would also include giftedness in that as well. People with sensory processing and also, alternative forms of speech and communication. So people on the autism spectrum as well. And so it kind of, and when you think about that, and then in my book, I kind of also added in mental health considerations as well, because there's often co-occurrences that happen where people with anxiety and depression actually are going to be communicating and responding to the world differently as well.
1 in 5. That statistic shocks me. It shocks me a bit. I guess I thought it would be less. Although, the Elaine Aron, if you include the highly sensitive people as a part of being neurodivergent, that there's 1 in 5. Yeah, I guess because people who are usually feel like they're such a minority.
Well, I think that there's different degrees, right? And, a lot of people who are gifted tend to have hypersensitivity and intensities. And as well, when you think about people who are on the autism spectrum or have ADHD as well, there are going to be sensory sensitivities that come along with that. And so there's going to be different ways that they process the world kind of in a heightened way.
Your book explores the experiences of people with different neurological differences. And I think that's what makes it so unique, because people don't usually go that deep into the neurological stuff. So you've touched on things like ADHD, autism, and even synesthesia. I can never pronounce it right. So I'm interested. I should probably ask that as a first question, but I know you also identify yourself as neurodivergent. Can you tell us a bit more about your own story, how you've come to this, and what labels, let's say, what would you categorize yourself as?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I was really late to my identification. And actually, I didn't include dyslexia and dysgraphia in the umbrella I was talking about earlier.
Dysgraphia?
Dysgraphia is people who have challenge with writing. And so that's, or production of writing. So it may not just be a motor function, but it could be a processing function in their brain where getting words onto paper becomes challenging. So similar to somebody who has trouble speaking. And so there could be varying degrees. And dyslexia is really, it's kind of a wide range that involves, differences in reading and comprehension and letter decoding. And so for me, I wasn't identified being dyslexic until I was in college. I took an organic chemistry class. I wanted to be an organic chemist, actually, and design medications because my mother had Parkinson's disease. And I was tutoring people. I knew the stuff, and I got to this exam, and by the time we got to the end of the exam, I didn't finish the last problem. And I got my exam back. I was devastated. I think I got like a 53. And I went to the professor and I'm like, what's happened? I knew all this information. I couldn't finish the exam. And he said, oh, no big deal. The class average, I think, was like a 50. He's like, so you passed. And I said, no, but something's wrong. So then I went to the student services at UC Davis, and they recommended that I get tested. And then I was tested, and I had, which was not known to me at the time, I had some areas in the 99th percentile. And then I also had discrepancies of being in the 40th percentile for visual processing. And so they only told me that I was dyslexic. I didn't know I was gifted at the time. But I had overcompensated my whole life. And so finally I was able to have notes where I had recordings and I had alternative forms of, I had a spelling ace with me at the time. We didn't really, because a lot of the exams were still handwritten. And so I learned a little bit about the accommodations. And when I was applying to graduate school, that was kind of one of my stories within a story was, well, there's this discrepancy you see in my grades earlier on because I was not identified and getting the appropriate accommodations and services.
What was it lonely? I mean, did you have anyone in your life who also shared similar experience, or were you the first one, really?
I felt really isolated, and I think that aside from that, when I kind of start to break it out even more, I had always been a kid that, I wore uniforms at school and the tags would irritate me.
Yes.
Somebody who would
I
be,
understand that.
yeah, right. I would be playing, I would be in the classroom and somebody'd be banging their pencil. It would be very distracting. So I had a lot of these sensitivities that I didn't really know or understand, and no one ever talked about them. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, it was really lonely at times. And when I studied, what made me actually a science communicator was my dyslexia, because I read everything and then I actually rewrote it in terms that I could understand by my brain. And then I was able to communicate it. And that's just kind of how it transpired to kind of create a profession for me in a lot of ways. So it's sort of a superpower. At the same time, there was a lot of struggle along the way too.
Wow.
And you were saying you could resonate with like tags and sensitivity.
Not just that, I really all my life had misophonia, food sensitivities, allergies, migraines, you name it, all the things you covered in your book. That's and I guess I've heard that. I mean, thank you for asking. So I'm personally very into things like functional medicine because in my attempt to find answers for my own difficulties with things like headache, sound sensitivity, I've tried everything. I've tried all the diets in the world, like vegan, paleo, keto diets. I've done all of it. Functional medicine doctors, tapping, supplements, mountains of it. I know all about it. Microbiome, probiotics. And I really find your literature, your book on topics such as allergies, gut-brain connections, and giftedness really refreshing. So can you say a bit more about it, actually? Dig a bit deeper into the unique wiring or the nervous system. I think most people wouldn't even have thought that gifted people are more likely to have allergies. Like, I just don't think people think they are related, general public anyway. And yet, at least anecdotally, I don't know if there are research backing it up, there probably is. At least anecdotally, it is so common. So can you tell us more about, like, are they wired differently? What's happening in their brain?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So when I started this investigation, I kind of came in through the lens with looking at neurodiversity, and the first area I looked at was in autism. And in autism, there was a lot of co-occurrences of allergies, alterations in the gut microbiome.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a little bit of a window to say, hey, something could be going on metabolically in different people with different brain wiring. And then I started investigating literature in ADHD, and there were similarities of increased allergies. And then I'm not sure if you're familiar with James T. Webb.
Yes.
He was the founder of Social Emotional Needs for Gifted. And he had done a SANG study where they had done a questionnaire looking at increased in allergies in especially to environment and food. And they found preliminary studies showing that increase in the population. Then Ruth Karpinski and Audrey Cole, they did a study with Menson's, and they found the same thing, that there was an increase in allergies, autoimmune disease, and also food sensitivities. And so that's kind of been a long-standing kind of window into that with questionnaires that people have found. And then more recently, looking at research in the studies, we find that, people who have these hypersensitive nervous systems are going to have a hypersensitive gut system that's going to kind of match that physiology. And, it's not completely clear environmentally what's happening with the environment, if epigenetic factors are happening along the way that are changing genes where people become more sensitive over time. But it's been a common theme where often, Jim would talk about in a subset of his clients that they would have a thing called reactive hypoglycemia.
Yes.
Where basically, so you're familiar with
I
that.
have it. Yes. I am a very...
So you could talk about for you. Yeah.
Pick
So
my
what was it
fingers
like?
10 times a day. Yeah. I think it's it one of the biggest cause of my migraines, and I didn't figure it out until last year. It is related, and also for me, it's very personal. When I hope my audience don't take any of these as medical advice. It's really, I'm not qualified. I'm just talking about my personal experience. My numbers don't actually go so low, but I had all the symptoms of hypo. It's weird.
Yeah. So you just have that crash.
I just hear these anecdotally from my clients again and again, and very often they get thrown into these basket diagnoses like chronic fatigue, IBS, the things that Western medicine doctors just label you as when they don't know what to do with you, or even personality disorders. It's very common, very sad, and that's why I think it's very valuable if you can eliminate on the idea of whether or not there's actually something going on in the brain that makes them react to the world slightly differently. I mean, if we have the resources one day to do more research, I would even be curious about, like, do we need to interpret these people's blood work differently? Is everything just actually different? Do they have a different set of metric rather than the normal? Because, the American normal, let's say, is just drawing the normal of the general population, which may not apply when you're wired differently.
Yeah, you raise such an incredible, important point in the sense that for standard medications, they're for a 175-pound, 6-foot man. Usually is how medications have been designed in our society. And our physiology is really different. Each individual's physiology, how they respond to medication, based on how their gut is going to be processing nutrients, how they can uptake the nutrients, and then on top of it, how well does that delivery system cross the blood-brain barrier, for example. And, coming back, I just want to back up with reactive hypoglycemia. There's often a misdiagnosis of, oppositional defiant disorder, or you get pinned in to being a difficult child because basically they're having a tantrum because all of a sudden physiologically all the dopamine has been flooded out of their system, and then on top of it all the glucose, they've used so much energy in their brain that they're having difficulty being able to even concentrate, and so they need to be able to have a quick reboot to have the nutrients back in their brain. And that's something people don't totally understand. And I think, coming back to what you're saying about these misdiagnoses that happen is, I think in Western medicine, we're so quick to want to offer a solution that includes a pill or something very quickly to alleviate symptoms, which really don't get to the core issue of what the trigger is. That could be simply, lights in a classroom that could be activating an individual's nervous system. A crazy study that I came across in my book when we think about inflammation.
I buy the most expensive blue light blocking things, fluorescent things, I think. And I wear these red goggles in classes, and that will lead to the next one out. How do we get the world understand? Because I either don't ever go to group classes, and bless me as an adult that I can have a choice, but then it is very restrictive because when I worked in an office, it's extremely difficult to get my boss or colleague understand my red glasses problem. So that's part of the thing, which is the social aspect when these struggles can be so invisible.
Yeah. And I think it has to do with education, and allowing for diversity, equity, and inclusion for neurodiverse people. And to not have it be seen as something that's wrong or bad or, being pigeonholed as being difficult or different, but being seen as, oh, this is the spectrum and the range of human beings. And, oh, we have a colleague who's wearing glasses that are filtering out lights that are inflammatory to their nervous system. And now they can have like a cohesive conversation with me, and, I could say cool glasses. And so it has to do with really shifting our dialogue and our communication about it, and really accepting people and allowing people to be who they are, rather than pigeonholing and saying you have to fit in this box, because a lot of neurodiverse people need alternative forms of communication, production, work scenarios. The biggest thing in a work setting and in a school setting is safety, right? I mean, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy, the first thing is safety.
Yes.
And if a person doesn't feel safe in their environment, they're going to be operating off the stress response, and they're not going to be in a position, or even present, because they're going to be flooded with anxiety and cortisol. And so we have to create inclusive environments based on universal design, where it includes all human beings to be safe and comfortable in their environment.
Yeah. Let's lay out some of the things people might struggle with, or laid out in your book.
So the sensory sensitivities could fall along really any sensation. So even when we're talking about food sensitivities, it could be in response to texture. Some individuals really, and coming back to texture and touch, we kind of force our kids to hug their aunts and uncles, and they may not like physical touch. It could actually feel painful for them. And really what you're talking about, the range of these sensitivities, they could be from ecstasy all the way to physical pain. And that's something that people don't really understand. It could be in relation to loud noises, garbage trucks, really unnatural sounds, like those blowers for gardening, could be very painful.
The mowing stuff.
Yeah. And so it could be sensations of scent. Some individuals really have a quick response to, different scents, where it could cause an allergy, but second, it can really cause them dizziness or give them a headache. And so when we think about all these different elements that people could struggle with, and then also for visual, people can see prints, where print on a piece of paper can cause them to have dizziness and a migraine, for example. Yeah. So
It's
there's
really
a lot.
when even people the closest to them misunderstand them. Like in the examples you gave, like the parents might think they're just trying to be intentionally difficult, or the partner's like, oh, it's so inconvenient to go to restaurants with you. I remember finding it really hard to find places to go on dates. It's everywhere. Like, I just don't enjoy talking in a noisy cafe. And I have clients who struggle with very similar things. So what kind of social and relational challenges do you think that can cause?
Oh, I think it could cause isolation. I feel that when people are trying to connect with others, they may not understand that going to a place like an amusement park, people think amusement parks are fun and exciting. And for a child or adult, there could be the sounds of the roller coaster could be painful. The crowds can be overwhelming. The music, the food, all of it could just be so overstimulating that, I think a lot of these adults and kids can toe the line between social isolation and solitude. And social isolation, could feed into the longing for connection. And then I think a coping and a resilience skill is being in solitude and having restorative elements like being able to read a book, walk in nature rather than, go to a busy cafe. And I think people really don't understand that even just sitting in a restaurant, I was talking to a group the other day, and a mother says our son only eats Italian food, and there's only 2 restaurants he'll go to because the rest of the restaurants in our city are way too overstimulating. And, sometimes he'll need to get up and go outside and kind of recollect himself because the environment is just too much. And so I think, again, a lot of people can otherize or minimize the struggle that somebody can be having, which seems to be a normal, quote unquote, circumstance that, for me, the way that they put tables together is brutal. I mean, you're sitting next to other people and you can't really block out their conversation, especially if you have auditory processing and high sensitivity.
Do you personally have any of these struggles? Can you share a bit more? And how did you find understanding in this world?
Yeah, well, for me, I definitely have auditory processing where sounds can be extremely painful. When people chew at the dinner table, it is very, sounds at the dinner table, if a fork or a knife can be really harsh on a plate. I feel that unnatural sounds really can activate my nervous system. And I can, so I do carry earbuds or noise canceling headphones and earplugs. I definitely have light sensitivity. I can get a migraine if I'm in too long of artificial light, if I don't have glasses. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the whole gamut. Certain fabrics feel like, like they could feel like burlap on my skin. Yeah. So I have to be very cognizant.
I always wear my clothes inside out.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you don't feel the seams.
Yeah. The seams really get to me.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't even care what people think these days. I think it's a very good stoic practice of trying to just not care so much about what the world thinks. So I just wear what I want and wear my red glasses. Just used to it now.
Yeah. And at the same time, you're able to navigate through the world and enjoy it, which I mean, I think is, enjoy it more than being under, attack and feeling not safe.
Yeah, I think I feel when I think about my school years in kindergarten even was hell. And I think it's probably very likely related to a lot of the things you said. And I feel very, very grateful and privileged now to be able to work for myself. At the same time, it's I work hard for it and it's the only thing I could do. And I think that's what a lot of people ask. I mean, let's talk about giftedness and this word that we started in the beginning before we jumped onto the recording. This is like a dirty word, this word gifted. And in your book, you also mentioned something called hyperbrain. Can you talk a bit more about your perception? What do you see in people and their relationship to this word? And what's the hyperbrain?
Yeah. Well, giftedness really is I mean, it gets so misunderstood in our society because people always want to think about the prodigy, right? Oh, I know someone who's gifted. That's, or they think about somebody with academic success, and they misunderstand that gifted really is a spectrum of the human existence that, can range from emotional giftedness, and that it really is asynchrony in development in a lot of ways, that you're going to have these great brain developments and expansions for processing information in a way. And at the same time, it could also be overstimulating and overwhelming. And really, Ruth Karpinski kind of came up with the idea of this hyperbrain, hyperbody when she did, and she brought it really from the autism movement in a lot of ways, from when she did the study in Menson's. And what really looking into that, aside from what we know from the physiological brain differences, for example, there's 11 that I talk about in my book, ranging from increased flow, increased area expansions, greater, communication across brain regions, so on and so forth. But when she's really talking about the hyperbrain, hyperbody, is the connection between what we're seeing in not just the brain anatomy, but also the physiology, where we're seeing increases, like we talked about a little bit with, increased allergies and food sensitivities, and really this increased ability for receiving and receiving the world and then processing it. And when you're receiving the world in this heightened ability, it can be a really overstimulating world. And so that's kind of what she was really looking into. And then also finding the co-occurrences for mental health conditions related to it, with the increase in anxiety and depression and OCD that could come along with it.
Hyperbrain it's coming from a book called, you mentioned it earlier.
Hyperbrain, hyperbody is coming from the original article from the study done by Ruth Karpinski. And I could send you it. And
yes, I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah. And then you could also look at it, and it talks about the study that she did with Menson's.
Menson's. Both you and I in our work talk about something called emotional giftedness. How would you define it? Because it's, again, not something that is in a lot of official literatures.
Yeah. The way that I really think about it is in a couple of ways. First, when we think about emotional abilities, we have our primal emotions with the limbic centers, and then we have this frontal, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, right? That's really expanded for emotional awareness and understanding. And that area is really expanded in gifted individuals. And on top of it, we know that gifted individuals do have a greater sense, they report greater sense of justice, empathy, and compassion for others. And that was something really that James T. Webb looked into with a lot of gifted individuals. And this emotional giftedness really is having this greater awareness that almost, I would say, teeters on, being able to experience others' emotions to a heightened level, where almost, I would say, those mirror neurons we have in our brain kind of are on overwork and on overdrive in a lot of ways.
Gotcha. And what would it look like from a day-to-day level and in relationships?
Well, in relationships, I think it would be really a sense of an emotional depth where they can sense, other people's level of anxiety and maybe even depression. Like they
Is
can
that from a young age, even before they have
I
the
feel
words
that
for it?
Yeah, I feel that they kind of come out that way. It's sort of like a genetic blueprint in some ways. It's a karmic blueprint where an individual really has that in tune emotional awareness where they, can sense maybe there's a disruption in the family or with a sibling or with an aunt or an uncle. They can, as an adult, see in their children or their spouse really being able to understand others' emotions. And at the same time, I think that, the big thing is teaching these individuals how to communicate about their emotions and really teach them self-compassion and ways to care for themselves. Because I think feeling, I think in some ways it's like they almost are feeling other people's energies and they can pick them up. And it could kind of get a little confusing. They can take on other people's, emotional settings as their own. And so they have to kind of be able to learn that awareness that there's this undercurrent of emotional currency happening across all beings, and that, they kind of need to contain themselves in some ways.
Yeah, and I would suspect that would give them a very unique family role, either conscious or not, from the get-go.
Yeah. I would say they're the wise soul, maybe. They're the ones that are the peacekeepers. They're the ones that are the caretakers. They would probably have the most empathy, even for somebody who may have treated them a little rotten.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they are more prone to things like codependency and parentification. And people who follow my work and the podcast would probably not be unfamiliar with these subjects, but it's still worth repeating. It's not your fault. It's the fact that you are more sensitive. You have a hyper brain. Can't help but pick up on all these signals from around you, and you feel the compulsion to do something to help people you love.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing you're pointing out, is that, and that's why I really love, the Buddhist compassion practice, in the sense that it's compassion for others and yourself, but also it's compassion in the sense of skillful means. So you're really choosing the right action rather than what you think, and one way that I think working with individuals, because, Jack Kornfield talks about this, it could be idiot compassion, right? Where you're not actually doing something that's relieving suffering for yourself or the other being. And, one thing that I really start to practice for myself in making decisions and helping others and helping myself is this coming from a love-based emotion or a fear-based emotion?
Oh, very good. Yeah.
And when I can align the love-based emotion, it's fluid. But if I'm doing something out of guilt or out of fear, then that's not gonna be the most compassionate action.
Yes. Yes. I like that. And then you have a quick question you can immediately ask yourself: is this love-based or fear-based? That kind of whacks you out of a zone.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions or ideas or words of affirmations that you can give to people who find themselves very emotionally porous, lacking in boundaries, picking up from the energies from everyone around? How do you help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be for them to really begin to pay attention and tune into their awareness of, in some ways, become a little bit curious how they feel around certain people, and inquire, does this person, each time I'm around them, are they pushing me in my boundaries? Are they respecting me? And asking those kind of questions, I think are really important. And at the same time, one thing that I practice is sometimes you have to say no. And saying no to somebody else is actually saying yes to yourself. And really finding ways, holistic ways to nurture yourself. If you feel depleted and you need solitude and alone time, trust yourself that you need that. You don't have to, go out to a party or a dinner. If you need to rest and take care of yourself, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think also, you already know this, and is going out into nature is highly restorative for your nervous system, and just being in nature for 20 minutes a day reduces your stress and rejuvenates you. And, it's not just human beings that we're connected to. We're connected to this entire earth. And the trees feed us and we feed the trees. And we begin to see these healthy synergistic relationships. It's really important, and to really recognize when you're feeling depleted in people around you, or you feel that you're becoming that parent or the codependent one, how, to figure out just maybe little by little ways that you could detangle yourself from that.
Have you done this work yourself?
Oh, yes. It's a process.
And if you don't mind and if you don't mind sharing, I would ask you, because I think people sometimes have not very realistic expectations on themselves. How long did it take you to?
I'm still doing it.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a process. I mean, I think all of this exploration is a process that, boundaries are confusing and people are complicated. And I think that it really, I still have people that I care about that I have to set boundaries with. And at the same time, there's times I need to set boundaries with myself.
Set boundaries with yourself. Expand on that, please.
In terms of, maybe not overworking or overcommitting myself, or trying to be everything to everybody, that coming back to saying no, and trusting myself when I get an intuition that things don't feel right. And, coming back to the continuous work I do in this area for myself is coming back to intuition versus instinct again. Is that when am I operating from intuition that, in the core, I know I'm using my higher thinking and something doesn't feel right, versus, rushing in and feeling that I need to go fix or change something for someone else.
Good tips. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but it's a process, I mean, have you worked a lot on this for yourself?
10 years in weekly coaching, therapy, books. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's really important to not think that you've gone back to ground zero when you have a lapse. Just adopt a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. It's hard. It's easier said than done. But every time I have a bit of a setback, I say to myself, I'll make my comeback stronger than my setback. At the same time, just go really, really gentle. And things like trauma with parents, with peers, I think these are journey of a lifetime.
Yeah.
So we need to be really soft and gentle with ourselves, I believe.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I mean, time flies. So I think I want to move on to finding more help for people. You did mention in your work that hyperbrain people have a greater capacity for creativity, innovation, which doesn't surprise me given all the hyperconnectedness in their brains. How do they harness that? Because very often people are so burdened by the internalized shame and being told that they're too much all their life, which really holds them back.
Internalized shame can hold them back. Exactly what you're saying. And I think it's really reprogramming the brain and rewiring it and allowing them, an individual who's really creative, I mean, I was lucky to grow up in a household where my dad told me to do what I loved and the rest will follow. So I had a privilege. I mean, that's a really big privilege to have that. And a lot of people don't. And I think that I'm telling you to do what you love and the rest will follow, and I know it's words, but the truth is that when we are really using that natural creativity, the world needs it. We have an economy that's built on creativity, and there's a lot of money to be made for creative people and in pursuits and innovation. And that's really what makes it. And so even if you're a person that has to work and you're working a 9-to-5 job, give yourself the opportunity to practice your creative pursuit for 20 minutes a day. Just 20 minutes a day that you get to give yourself for something that you love to do. Little by little, the doorways of how you can incorporate that in your everyday life, where it could be your, way of life, it will happen. And it really comes with practicing and having the faith and also being okay that things may take time.
Yeah. Thank you. I have one question on that might sound very silly. How do you know if you love something?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is with creative people and gifted people, they love a lot of things. So I think it's really the thing that brings you joy, that, when you think about, one thing or two things that you could be doing, it just lights you up. And when you're in it, you get that natural dopamine and flow state happening for you.
Yeah. I think people can become so disconnected from themselves that these are things they need to relearn.
Yeah, and give themselves permission to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it's particularly important for gifted people to find a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives?
Well, for all people, it is. Rush University showed that the number one key for longevity in life is connection, purpose, and meaning. And when people have purpose, they live longer because they and so for a gifted individual, I think the struggle that I often hear is that they know something is inside of them. They just haven't had the avenue to do it. And that's why I'm saying go ahead and just try, because when you have that purpose and meaning, it trumps everything else.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Just taking a pause, and I think we're coming to the end of our chat. What is your current passion, meaning, and flow then, if you don't mind sharing with us, Nicole?
Yeah. Right now, I love chanting. So I chant every day. And
is there a particular school or approach that you're doing it with?
Yeah. And so I do Vedic chanting, and I really, I find it to be a beautiful meditative connection.
Nice.
And yeah. How about you?
I don't know. I'm always interested in multiple things. I always go into a bookshop, and it's just like my church for me. And I get drawn to different sections and different times. Right at the moment, not entirely sure. I'll think about it and come back to you. But there are ongoing themes like, food and city life. Yeah. I like exploring cities, paint and art, and yeah.
You named a lot.
I know.
So
I know. I mean, I have been a bit freaked out by the whole AI thing lately, about how much it can do and how much it will change the world. And so I've been looking quite a lot into it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a new frontier we're entering.
Do you have any particular thoughts on that? Do you think how is it going to change the work that you do or the landscape that we work in, or does it?
I feel that it's as everything in moderation, right? I think that there could be a lot of...
I'm not sure American culture is very good at that.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, exactly, right? I think there could be a lot of great breakthroughs. I think there could be a lot of codependency. I was kind of playing with Chat GPT myself, and I still love writing. so for me, I see how it can help generate ideas that maybe you can be working with, but I also I feel that there's an element that humans still need to I think it could help with creative pursuits, but I also think that individual creativity is a beautiful exploration as well.
I absolutely agree. I think I went on YouTube and go like, how to not be replaced by AI, what job's gonna be gone, like just to educate myself. I do think it's a bit naive to say that it's not creative. I think it can be, but it does have a limit. I think it's somewhere in the middle. It's an underestimation to say, oh, they just grab things from whatever is already there. I personally, and I'm not an expert in this, I'm just basing this on my personal experience and guesses. I feel like it does seem to be generating new things. However, it's not the same. It's not the same. And I try to treat it as a therapist and talk to it. It does give me very box standard answers that sometimes makes me want to punch it. Like, go practice mindfulness, talk to supportive friends and families. All those things that are on the website in the first 5 pages of Google. But if I'm really desperate and I just want something to talk to, it's there. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, I felt weird even back 10 years back with all the text-based therapy with BetterHelp and all that anyway, because the way I see these things is it's a relational process. You really need a deep relationship with someone and let yourself deeply be seen and all that for things to be powerful. That's my personal belief. So I don't know, Nicole. We're in a changing world, as my grandfather always says. The world is changing.
It is.
That's his mantra.
Yeah.
The world is changing. Anyway, thank you so much for today. I really, really appreciate your work and the fact that we get to talk about things that are not usually addressed. Really appreciate you and your work. Any final words for our audience who might have a hyper brain and struggling with all sorts of things?
I want to say thank you, and I appreciate all the beautiful work. And there could never be a computer or AI that could replace you, because you're an amazing soul. So,
Likewise,
so
right back at
really,
you.
the work that you're doing is helping so many. And, and for your audience who's hyperbrain is just like me, we're not too different, and you're not alone. There are more people out there like you, and keep being you. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You're an amazing, person just being here. There isn't anything you have to do, anything different. And, just be you, because there is nobody else that's you.
Thank you. That's really, really beautiful. Okay, well, I will let you go and do more chanting. Thank you so much once again, and let's stay connected.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much.
All right. Keep doing. Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. For more, please head to eggshelltherapy.com. There you will find more stories, articles, and resources for people just like me and you. Bye now.